or tentative?
Okay.
Let's go.
That's okay. Let's make a move. So welcome to the really the first webinar post move one. We've already had one webinar, which was just to get everybody's juices flowing and get people into a conversation. But this is really the start of another the first of 9 conversations that we're going to have via webinar. And they're mostly focused around you and your learning and what's being revealed to you from the various conversations that you've been in. Actually, I'm going to make a correction. It's not 9 webinars. It's 5 webinars. No, it is 10 because we have them once a month. Yeah. And what they're designed to do is to really just to check in with you, see how the learning's going, what's being revealed to you. And what we discovered in our last cohort last year was that the learning that happened within the conversation of these webinars was immense. And that everybody said, yeah, we want more of the conversation to hear how other people experienced the learning journey throughout the Foundations program. So what we're going to do, the beat of today is going to be, we're post move 1. You've had 1 LSG, you've had the second exploration land, which is really asking you some questions that defined some of the conversations that you had in your LSG. So this is going to be the beat. Paula's going to do a bit of an opening around some themes that we've been identifying. Then Chloe's going to put up some questions in the chat, and we're going to be able to interact with all of you through those questions. And let's take some time to explore those. Paula and I are going to jump in and ask you different questions for the sake of learning and expanding what you share and offer. And let's see where we end up. Now, our promise is that we're going to be pretty well closing out at the top of the hour. If it's 1 or 2 minutes over that, please give us permission. But if you have to jump out straight at the top of the hour, let us know, and we'll make sure that you have some closing comments there. So that's going to be the beat. Again, we just encourage you to be in this conversation, to share what's going on with you in a way that serves you, because we're all going to learn from that. So over to you, Paula.
Thank you. And everyone, you'll notice that I'm coming through Tony's screen, and that's because I'm over here. Okay, I'm on the opposite side of him. And we're actually coming in from the Hunter Valley today, where we're holding a masterclass. And our masterclass is for graduates from the Foundations program who have already built a repertoire of skills and practices that enable them to open up the most sensitive conversations. Just getting a bit of kickback on one of those.
I'll just go into mute, no problem.
Yeah, just so long as people can hear me.
Yep.
Can you all hear me still?
Yep.
All right, thank you so much. So what I wanted to share that for is because what we're setting up for, particularly out of Move 1 and having tuned in, and thank you so much for allowing me to be a stranger in your LSGs. What a brilliant series of first meetings they were. I wanted to share back some of the themes that we heard on the way through to give us a sense of grounding before Tony asks you a series of questions to have you in a deeper level of reflection. Tony, invitation is to jump in the dance with me.
Sure, no problem.
So I've taken some notes. I'm going to open out what I believe are the things that were in common between the groups as a starting point to get us back in the game in this domain of assessments. So Tim, I'm looking at you because you asked a great question about what are the clues that you might see in yourself that have you aware that you have an assessment running. And I thought it was such a great question that you asked to the group. It was a provoking question. And it's something that I want to put up for further reflection as a group. How would we know that we have an assessment that's running us rather than us being aware of it? I'd also like to open up this idea that one of the groups discussed that assessments aren't necessarily good or bad. There was a tendency for us to talk about them being negative, but in fact, assessments are. We live in them. They become us. They filter how we see ourselves and the world around us. And your only job at this point of the program is to begin to observe the quality of your assessments and to start to understand where they've come from. So that very unique social, cultural, historical framework or history that has brought you to see the world as you see the world. So in observing them, that is enough. We don't want you to solve to them, which brings me to theme 2. I noticed, and it's a tendency, and I would say it's a Western world, fast-moving leader tendency to observe the assessment and then say, quick, how do we fix it? And so what we're wanting to invite you to do is to refrain from going, here's an assessment, it's a negative thing, I need to fix it. Instead, wow, that's interesting. Where has this assessment come from? How is it coloring my world? How am I playing it out? How is it affecting how I show up to others? How is it affecting my leadership? I wonder how this is for others that I lead. And to start to go into a deeper layer of questioning for yourself to be able to reveal your unique relationship with these narratives that you live in. So there's nothing to solve. There's much to observe. It's not a problem. What we want is for you to start making a new kind of sense of how you show up inside the narratives that you're constructing day in, day out. Tony, anything to add?
Yeah, probably a little note. It's an interesting note. You know, we can talk about assessments as a thing. We can objectify them and talk about them that way. Not that we mean it that way, but you see, it's not that we have assessments. We are assessments. We are the assessments that we have about ourselves, and then we live those assessments out. So it's deeply connected to the way we show up, deeply connected to how other people identify with ourselves in terms of our identity, and thus strongly connected to moods. So not only are we assessments that we have about ourselves, we are the moods we live in, because that's what constitutes being a human being. So that was just my little point there, Pete.
Thank you. And hopefully you don't mind indulging our co-creation here, because this is what we do. We are in a conversation that's intended for you to be provoked inside and for something to spark inside you where you suddenly get a new way of making sense or seeing how it is for you. And Tony, I had that point from all 3 of the LSG meetings. I had a little note in here about taking responsibility for our mood. And it's probably something that sits more in our practice. The more that you see this is that often we will blame the condition of the outside world. Let's call it the market dip. Let's call it coronavirus. Let's call it the other person in our team who's ignorant and stubborn and won't get on board. We can tend to work with blame rather than understand the nature of our assessment and the mood or relationship that we have to what's happening around us. So the invitation in our program is to go within, rather than go to seek to solve what's going on out there, to understand the nature of the assessment and the mood that it provokes for you, and to use that as a inquiry for you to deepen this sense of it not having you being aware of what's playing out for you, if that makes sense. So this could be something we pursue in this conversation. Noticing how we show up. So we're in this very much inward looking, how do assessments play out for me? What mood am I prone to? How does that affect how I show up? So starting to notice other people's reactions and responses, and I'm not sure if Harry's on the call now, but I know he's been in a deliberate experiment to explore different ways that he's showing up and how that affects his team. So this doesn't need to be an independent exploration. You can start to see the impacts that your moods and assessments, when you're living them out, start to have for those around you, if you haven't started to see that already. So there's some of the themes that came out of the LSGs. There was a very healthy exploration. And let's continue now with our questions to open out the group dialogue and see what's sitting with our group as further questions, further reflections, and let's see where we go to. Over to you, Tone.
Yeah, thanks, Paula. So just before we kick off, we've got 2 dark screens. We've got 3 dark screens. We know Andrew's on his phone in the car. We've got another 2 people there as well, and we're just wondering if there's Ange. Welcome, Ange. And there's another.
Hi. I'm here on the phone as well. I'm just in my car.
Hey, Harry.
Thanks, Harry.
Yeah.
Got you. Okay, I'm just going to make a note there. Ange, Harry, and there's one other person there as well, just before we get going. reveal yourself.
I'm here. It's Jeremy.
Jeremy.
Hey, Tom.
Jeremy.
Yeah, we got you, Jeremy. Oh, Jeremy, are you on your phone as well as? No? Okay. Yeah. So just have a look. If you haven't got your camera on and you're not on the phone, could you just make sure that that's on, just so we can reveal this last person? Otherwise, we're just going to jump in and we'll pick that person up along the way. No, let's pick the person up along the way. Okay, Chloe, could you throw those questions up? So we've designed 3 questions based on our where we think you are, and based on Paula's introduction here. And we're going to drop them up in a moment. We don't necessarily want you to interact with all of them individually. You can do that. That's an approach. But the other way of doing that is just by, getting a sense for those questions and then responding to in more of a poetic way. In other words, we're not looking for structure. We don't want you to think too structure. If it doesn't all come together for you in this response, we say this is a good thing, because you're in uncharted territory in the flow of this unstructuredness, this creative thinking, this just responding in the moment. Chloe, have you got those questions that you can put up?
Right.
Okay, here we go. So how would you describe your learning experience so far? So all your interactions with us, what is being revealed to you about our exploration of assessments? And then what moods, we're using moods intentionally, not just one, what moods have you observed yourself in since move 1? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask Ian to make the first move on that, and then we're going to go to Michelle. And then I've got the beat around the screen. I'm just going to snake around if that's okay. And allow us to interact with you, and for the sake of learning, let's see how we go. So over to you, Ian.
Thanks, Tony. So I'm probably going to, I'll see how I go.
Yeah,
so the thing that emerged for me, in particularly the assessment and assertion area, which was a concept I was familiar with, but it was really good to revisit it. And one of I might leap around into the coaching as well, because one of the things that emerged for me was a kind of oscillating between, and I've thought about it since, it's probably like being in the mood of ambition, and then I keep coming up against this brick wall, which I think is probably a mood of resignation. So I feel like at the moment I'm experiencing some of the moods, and I've done a bit of digging on the assessments, but I suppose the thing that's come to me is what you're bringing out, Tony, is that strong connection between assessment and mood. In fact, how in many ways the assessment activates the mood. So I've just been more aware, and I think one of the ways, just back to that question about clues, is I seem to, my self-assessments are often come with a mood of self-righteousness, I think is the only way to call it, is that sense of indignation that, like, how dare they? Again, it doesn't, as Paula was saying, it doesn't have to go be good or bad. It's just, in terms of that clue, I've just become more aware that my indicator of a strong assessment is often associated with that strong sense of indignation or, self-righteousness. Self-righteousness might be a bit overly judgy, but it's the indignation. So I'm sort of swimming around in all that at the moment. Happy for questions or comments, whatever.
Yeah. I think it's a really good point you make, that, we can float in and out of many moods, and, resignation is one that sort of surfaces for you, and what we would advocate is to do nothing more and observe the mood that you find yourself in. And you might not even be able to label that feeling, that sense, and that's okay. Even labeling it can limit it in a way. Because what we want to do is that we want to allow ourselves, and this is very countercultural, is to allow those feelings to arise where, rather than fighting off or warding off that feeling because we don't like it, but allowing that feeling to begin to educate ourselves with it, to understand it, because moods reveal as much as they conceal. So what I mean by reveal, that they actually can open ourselves up to possibility, but they can also close us down to possibility as well, because we've become so focused on what's important for us. Let me tell you a fast story. So a few weeks ago, I was working with a person deep in resignation, as was my assessment. And she saw the possibility of something, but she kept on denying herself. No, I see absolutely no value in having this, being in conversation with her senior leader to make progress on that. She knew the damage that it was doing to her identity. She understood that in a way, but she couldn't see it in herself to get out of her resigned state, to be in that conversation, to open out what was possible that they could. Because when I asked her, well, if this conversation was to go well and you were to, the relationship could move on, what would that mean? And she goes, I don't even want to go there. So closing that, resignation can close us down, and we can delude ourselves that we're in it. So it's a wonderful mood to explore, Ian, is the point of my my offering here. And not to resist it, not to fight it or oppose it, just accept the space you're in and begin to really see how this plays out for you.
It's funny because it kind of wears a suit of respectability in some ways. It's a very, I experience it's like sensible. It's being realistic and all that sort of, just some of the cloaks that it puts over itself at times, I think.
Oh, so much so. So much so.
So, Ian, could we rephrase that and say perhaps it's easier to follow the habits of the crowd than it is to challenge the assessment that we might be living in?
Yeah, I actually think, just as Tanya was talking, I think there's also something in there about you get something from it. And then I know there's a thing about how some of those moods have the desire to help you in some ways. But I think after a while it gets comfortable, I mean, you can be miserable, but at least it's my misery. At least it's sort of, I'm used to it. It's in a weird way, it's comfortable rather than the risk, the apparent assessed risk of doing something different. I mean, I don't live in that all the time, just by the way, but when I find myself gravitating to it, there's kind of it's like going under your doona a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just in closing, Ian, before we move on to Michelle, is that without being aware of it, and this is our blindness, we can commit ourselves to suffering it under that blanket that you talk about. So we bring on our own suffering within our own resignation.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and that can last sometimes short periods of time, but it can last a lifetime as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thanks, Ian. Deeply appreciate your getting us started and your offering. So Michelle and then Shane, thank you. We'll just take you off mute. There you go.
Yeah.
Thanks, Michelle.
So the first question, how would you describe your learning experience so far? Really good in terms of the concepts and the framework, and how, once you understand what those frameworks are in terms of, speech acts and assessments and assertions, etc. Once you understand all of those, then you've got a nice sort of platform to explore, to be able to determine, in terms of moods, for example. I guess what I've been doing over the last couple of weeks is really just, I guess, almost feeling my body first, rather than, if I feel that in my body that I'm feeling a bit annoyed or anxious or frustrated or something, I'm feeling it in my body, and then going, okay, what's happening? What thoughts am I having, or what mood am I in that's creating this feeling that I have at the moment? And it might be simply that I put my cup down on the table a bit louder than what I normally would, and I sense that and go, okay, what am I thinking at the moment? What mood am I in? So I think it's just been good to sort of put the spotlight on myself a little bit more. And what's been revealed, so question number 2, so I guess for me over the last week, there were 2 days where we had some like a offsite meeting with the senior management team and the executive team at work. And so I probably went through every mood there was to go through during those 2 days, in terms of, you know, from ambition to wonder and curiosity and excitement, etc., to being quite resentful and a little bit resigned, or so it went through all sorts of flavors. One of the things I guess I'm pondering is, I like to think of moods as they're either helpful or unhelpful. They either help you move forward, or they can stagnate you, or help, or even take you back. But it's almost, I'm trying to move away from this idea that it's almost good and bad, and trying to, you know, is it my mood, or is it their mood, or is my assessment helpful or unhelpful, or is it their assessment that's unhelpful or unhelpful? You know, that's sort of getting a bit murky in terms of understanding what's creating these. I mean, I know it comes from core concerns, you know, your core concerns, you know, is where the assessments will come from. But yeah, I guess I think because it's been so up and down the last week, just really trying to, what's the word? Not get too caught up in being, I've got a problem here that it's my problem, you know, I'm the problem here that needs to be solved, versus, or someone else is, or some other people are, or rather than trying to get into, I'm struggling to not get into that space, if that makes sense. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense when I'm listening to myself say all that, but I feel as though I'm not clear when I'm in a mood as to, is this my problem, or what can I do about this, apart from just manage my own mood? Feel frustrated. This is frustrating me. I don't know if it's my problem or their problem or no one's problem, but I'm in this mood, and the only thing I can do about it is take responsibility for my mood and shift that and feel fine. But the issue might still be there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, no, I think it's what you're offering is terrific. You know, let me begin, and Paula will jump in as well, but particularly around the body. I mean, it's not that we have a body, we are a body. And, you know, our moods and emotions and our stories, even the way we listen, we see, even though these are the receptacles, you know, it's the body, it's the nervous system that puts this relationship together. Okay, here's a bit of theory for you, a bit of neuroscience, and it's around the notion of the nervous system. Now, the Latin word for the nervous system is computare. Now, computare, in our understanding, is that it's something, an entity that puts different relationships together to make sense of something. And that's exactly what the nervous system does. It doesn't just rely on sight or listening. This thing feels, it's sensing its way through the environment. And so even, you know, the computers have picked up that, the tech world, and gone, well, computer, because it puts relationships together and spits something out. But I wanted to, in the context of that, say, well, where do these come from? You know, whose are they? Who do they belong to? Well, what we claim is that they belong to the social space you exist in. So when you're with other people, you can't help not thinking about what's going on for them, what's going on for me, anticipating certain things. Should I go and talk to that one? What are they going to say next? So all of that is arising in the social space. So it is very difficult to discern whose mood am I picking up on? Is it mine, or what story do I have about myself? So when you're talking about mood shifting, what you're really potentially asking yourself is to tune into what story am I playing about this social space, me in the social space. Is it a narrative that's serving me? Is it not? Am I bringing in my bias and prejudices and, you know, my historic stuff into this? Or am I leaving it an open space, an open field to be able to be a different observer in that space? So it's a very good question. It's a very good space to be in, because in this space, there's no right and wrong. There's just a number of other observers all probably doing the same as what you're doing. But I think the more important question is, how do we navigate that? How do we navigate in a way that keeps me safe and, you know, the dignity intact, and in a way moving forward with what's important for you and what's important for other people? So I think it's a wonderful space that, Michelle, what I would offer is, can you accept that weird space that you're in without trying to clutch at straws or clutch at a structure, and feel very unstructured and sort of off the cliff with this even more?
Yeah.
That's where the learning is, in that social space, which has no boundaries.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep.
What does that bring up for you?
Oh, yeah, I guess there's, you know, removing that black and white sort of, there's got to be a response, there's got to be an answer to it. Well, not necessarily. It's just an experience.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And another way to look at that too, which is something that I'm developing myself. It's an experience, and it's a drama. Can I open myself to the drama of this social space and just be with it?
Yeah, a saying that I've heard before, which I quite like to remember, and it sort of is interesting in this space, is, you know, we're not a product of our experiences, we're actually a product of how we process our experiences. And so, you know, I guess you can have an experience and process it in a helpful and learning way, or in a way that's not. So
Wonderful. Thanks, Michelle. Okay, so we're going to go to Shane and then Sawako.
Thanks, Tony. I think for me, learning's so far been very powerful. And by that, I mean that every day or every sort of interaction that I'm going into, I'm thinking about these things and what I'm doing. But probably, for me, it's focusing on myself, and whilst it's negative, it's good for me because I want to focus on those things where there's been areas of frustration or disappointment, or why it keeps happening and what I'm doing in that space for that to occur. So for me, I think from coaching with yourself, Tony, and the LSG last week, which is really good with my group, was two things: how I'm presenting each day and really looking at that. And I think the way I'm presenting and probably listening to people has made an effect on the environment. Certainly not all me, there's other factors, but the team seems to be in a good space at the moment. And I feel like I've got a sense of calmness on how I present and interacting with the team, which is I'm really enjoying. Probably for me, what I've found, some of the assessments that I make, I keep relying on past assessments and bringing that into current assessments. So I'm not learning from that, or not allowing that assessment to perhaps change in a similar type scenario, if that makes sense. So where I sit, if I've had a negative experience or failure, embarrassment, whatever, hurt, or whatever it is, I'm sitting in that mood of anxiety and protecting myself somewhat. And so, but I'm not allowing myself to get out of that. So what I've been trying to do is to stop that and to go to a place of acceptance and let go a little bit and to see what happens. So with that, I think in some relationships and scenarios, it's been really good, and it's relatively straightforward because it's not big ticket items necessarily. What I have probably done this last week is try to move from that mood of anxiety to acceptance in a relationship that has been difficult and challenging, or I've been burnt a little bit. So I'm in that space at the moment, and I feel good about it, albeit some nervousness about it, but it needs to happen, and just to see how I go. But overall, I feel a real sense of calmness and a bit more positive about that, because I probably feel like I've had a few small wins and gains and understandings over the last few weeks with some of the smaller things. So yeah, for me, that's been very strong, the self-reflection and what can I do and keep doing and make sure that I maintain that to that kind of.
Oh, well, thanks, Shane. I've got a question for you. How would you describe your relationship with courage?
In some scenarios, very good. Others probably not so much if I'm trying to protect myself a bit.
Because I was listening to in that moment where you've taken the low hanging fruit, you've been doing very well there, and then some of those bigger at risk conversations, you're placing yourself in that.
Yeah.
And my listening to that was that's you beginning to cultivate courage by not stepping back out. So I'm wondering what you can do to further develop a more powerful relationship with courage. Is what are you going to do next? How can you navigate more into that relationship and lean more into it rather than leaning out of it? And I wonder what might that produce.
You're not sure. I'm always thinking it's going to be a test of some sort. It's going to fail. I'm going to get embarrassed, but that's a good thing, because it will be how I react to that and how I respond to that. And if I do that well, then I think that's a big step forward. So,
yeah, right. Yeah. Well, journey well.
Yeah.
Enjoy the breakdown. And because that's the learning space. So yeah, thanks, Shane. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, Sawako and then Tim. You want to take the next two?
Thank you. For the first question is, how would you describe your learning experience so far? And I think it's good. And I can see more things from the distance myself. So I can feel like my body language and also the tone of the voice. And obviously it's negative mood when it's like a resignation or resentment I can feel, and also that I understand I'm using for the more like a strong language or like a tone of voice. And what is revealing to you about the exploration of assessment is my assessment is quite attached to the like emotion. That's what I think. And when I good mood or good feeling and emotionally good and always positive and usually neutral or positive, but something is not that my emotion is down, and also my assessment is going to be negative. That's what I'm observing myself. And what mood have you observed? And I basically experienced from the conversation for the starting from optimistic the mood and like a curiosity, but ending up with resentment, or resignation. So that was a very interesting experience. So when I started for the one of the meeting, and I really curious what is going to happen, and maybe it's going to be finishing and good, and but in the end, it's going to be more like a resignation, and the other side is also the resignation, like a fighting mode. so that one was an interesting experience. So, but I understand it. So, and that whole day after the finishing for the resignation for the conversation, I can't get it out from that meeting. So even like a meeting is finished and going home, but this until like before the sleeping, only thinking about what's going to happen. So that's what I experienced.
Sawako, thanks for sharing. It sounds like a merry-go-round of moods and emotions and experiences, and and that's life, right? That's great. But I have an offer for you, and this is something that we're going to start to get more and more into in our program, but I'd love to be able to offer something to you. I'm just wondering now if you were able to sit back in your chair a little bit, and so that you feel the back of your shoulders. Now watch everybody else do this too, straight away. And just open up your shoulders here. So you're sort of, that's right. And then have a sense of somebody's pulling up a piece of here so that you're lengthening up through your spine. Yeah, pretty well. And just feel that opening across here. And see if you can just get some air down into your belly, into your tummy. And just to feel the energy of showing up more, what we call resourcefully. And I'm wondering, as you move through your day, your week, that you begin to practice showing up more like this, to have a different experience of yourself. And this is going to attune you more and more into the mood space as well, Sawako. And I think it's going to be really helpful for you to stop and think, and because I know that English isn't your primary language, and this may be really help you just to presence yourself and be in the space. So, and I'd love to check in with you over the next week or two just to see how you're going with that.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, just open that now. What's this opening for you? Just these subtle and slight movements around your physiology. What's that opening?
Yeah, that's true. Always like I'm lean inside, like lean towards the computer for every day. So maybe it's good idea to like a little bit sit back and for the body relaxing, and maybe different mood or different way of seeing. So yeah, I'll try it.
Yeah, give it a try and explore your emotional mood world from there. Thanks, Sawako.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got Tim and then we've got Julian.
G'day, Tony. Hey, good. Hey, so question one, how would I describe my learning experience so far? Yeah, it's a funny one. Like, I think I've realised that there's a lot of learnings, and I think I've got a long way to go. That's just, I just feel like I'm on the start of the journey. So that's my experience so far. I think I kind of just started on the road and I'm ready to get cracking. But yeah, just at the start of the road, which is exciting.
Wonderful.
I have a question around that actually. So like it feels like there are so many things to consume and to learn. I'm just wondering, is there any like tips or tricks to hold on to the learnings or to keep checking in on the learnings that we're learning?
Well, look, there's no tips and tricks, but my offering to your question as a response is to don't hold on to anything, let it go.
Oh, okay. All right.
Well, you see, because when we start to hold on to something, then we don't allow new learning to come in.
Oh, okay.
I know that might be a surprise, Tim, or it might not surprise you from our conversations. But you see, we've got to break this habit or this pattern of ours to think that I've got to hold on to this because you know, if I do, I'm going to miss out on something. But you see, our nervous system is designed for things for life to flow through us, and we're to flow into life. That's
right.
Your body is already learning what it needs to learn, and it's already let go of what's not important, and it's already retaining what's important for it without you even really knowing about it.
Okay.
So it's just about sitting in that space of going, well, let it go, because learning's already happening in those moments.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I mean, what's being revealed, I think, I mean, I'm just learning something again now that I need to let go of things and yeah, just let it kind of happen, which is cool. I think there's a lot more clarity around the assessments, my assessments versus what the facts might be, which is super helpful. Yeah.
Cool.
In terms of moods, I think I've definitely noticed myself going through the different moods. I've been trying to stay in a mood of acceptance or go to that curiosity mood, but noticing that and I've definitely been noticing when I've been dealing with people that can put me instantly in a mood of resignation, and it's like instantly you kind of curl up and you do that, and then like you feel like that for like half an hour later, just after being on the phone with someone and being like, how did that happen just then? And how do I snap myself out of it and get back to how I was prior to picking up that phone call? I don't know if anyone else has the same thing if they walk into a meeting or they get off the phone with someone, but it happens sometimes. You don't expect it. So yeah.
So that's how you learn. That's what you learn.
Right.
You know, because probably up until now you've been blind to that, and now you're learning how you respond, how you react. So you're cooking well, Tim. You're cooking.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it. Okay, Julian, and then we've got Jeremy.
Yeah, I suppose describing the learning experience, I found it quite intriguing so far. It's probably opened up a lot of thought processes that I was probably blind to up until sort of, you know, looking at all the different, you know, things we went through on that day. And I'm sort of, you know, thinking about it sort of puts me in a bit of a state of wonder about what's coming next, and how that's going to be able to influence me. In terms of the second part, I find these days I'm probably recognizing a lot more of the assessments I'm making as judgments, or, you know, sort of looking at things in a different way than I used to, and realizing that potentially I'm making, you know, a judgment rather than an assessment on someone or something, and how that sort of affects what I'm doing sort of moving forward. And the moods, I suppose I'm finding that I'm sort of in a bit of a cycle of acceptance and resignation, sort of floating between the two, almost like in a bit of a roller coaster, sort of a bit all over the shop at the moment.
Julian, thanks for sharing that. And, you know, it's really interesting when a lot of the times when we're doing this work and we're introducing it, and, you know, what we're offering here is a different way to observe yourself in the flow of life in connection with what you do most, you know, in your niche, work, family. You see, what we're beginning to notice is probably what's always been playing out. We're just starting to notice that. When we start to notice it, we can start to make some moves over time to navigate differently out of those habitual patterns. So again, what I can offer, Julian, is do nothing other than observe, observe, and observe yourself. And be curious about, wow, look at that. Look at the mood I'm in now. And, or look what just happened and look at my response to that. The more we can do that, the more that we've got the ability to change in time. So it sounds like it's going well. You also are cooking, Julian, I would say. Thank you, Julian.
Changing.
What's that, sorry?
It's changing.
It's changing, yeah, it's great, that's great. So we've got Jeremy and then we've got Ryan, and I'm just mindful too, we've got maybe, 12, 13 minutes to go, and we'll get through everybody. And I've made a list of those people who have sort of shared the body of it up front. So the next webinar, we're going to start with those people who we might not get the opportunity to fully explore those questions. But so Jeremy and then Ryan.
Hey guys, look, I guess for me in terms of the learning experience, I think I got a much greater awareness of kind of moods and where I might have been on various issues, particularly tackling challenging people that have put me into a position of resentment on certain aspects or certain things, and opened my eyes around how I might be able to shift out of that kind of mood into a framing of wonder or curiosity. And interestingly, as it would happen, something that triggers me in past things around going straight into resentment, kind of paused on judgment and paused on, or held my ground on kind of being resentful, and actually was able to see the situation much clearer, and probably more as you were saying before, Tony, was able to laugh it off a little bit and not actually hold it, and which I thought was quite interesting, given just how much previous similar situations that got me really stuck in a resentment mode or mood. So I do put that down to a fair bit of learning in terms of just understanding what's going on and how I've reflected on the situation. And it's certainly something I've observed from things that we'd revealed through that exploration of assessments, and kind of how I'd responded to a very similar situation that blew my trust before with the same person, and found myself in a different situation of being able to let a situation go much easier in terms of not getting stuck.
Thanks, Jeremy. Paula?
Jeremy, thank you so much for sharing. And there was a really interesting turn of phrase that could I share back something that you said was something, somebody put you into a position of resentment, quote unquote. And so what I wanted to maybe suggest is, or maybe even ask you, can someone else, and anyone can jump in, but Jeremy, the question's firstly directed to you, can someone put us into a mood of resentment?
My initial answer is yes. Now I reflect on that, saying, is that the case? Because we're allowing them to put us into that. So, so I think it's probably double-edged. Yes, people can definitely put you into that, but it's whether you allow that to be the case. Is that a good enough answer for you, Paula?
I think it's a great answer, Jeremy, because it's starting to unearth our relationship with the nature of us to oppose. And so the fact is there's someone there that's doing something, but you have a relationship and an assessment with what's going on in front of you. And that relationship in part is taking a stand to oppose it for whatever reason, which then brings on the mood of resentment. And so, if we're going to mess around with it, then we have to have a darn good reason for wanting to reverse the automatic tendency to do that. And so as we move further and further into the program, the darn good reason starts to come to life. And I suggest that maybe at the end of that darn good reason is our capacity to feel well, at peace, at ease, with whatever anyone wants to do right in front of us, and be able to work with it and still cultivate a mood that doesn't have us in automatic oppose. And I want to acknowledge you for being able to pause when it happened again. And then what were the conditions you created for yourself not to automatically go to a pose? And I keep illuminating that, whatever you did where you just let it go. And there's a little secret sauce there for you.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy. And just in terms of what provokes us is that our history comes roaring up in front of us. Often not what's happening, it's our history that's ignited. One to reflect on. Okay, so Ryan and then Angela. I'll just take you off mute. There you go. No?
I've done that. Good.
Gotcha.
So my learning experience so far is that during the week last week, I was at a 2-day off-site meeting, and we explored elements of speech acts for generating possibilities. And I've been to at least a 1-day intensive or a 2-day intensive on this subject. And so for the learning experience, including the LSG and what we've done so far in Move 1, I feel that we've covered the theme. I've covered the themes quite a bit now. So the more I do it, the more I become familiar with it. However, I've got this in the car with me, and I've got my folder to refer to moods. So it's for me, the learning experience, how can I build some more of it in my day to day, and how can I reflect on what I'm doing in regards to assessments more. I still can make some observations and comment to it, but for me, it's about really giving it the opportunity during the day for reflection about what's happening. So I feel that as much as I'm being exposed to the themes, I could probably do more, the day-to-day, building up of my understanding of my moods, assessments, etc. So what's being revealed to me about assessments is that I'm very quick to find allies and people I can talk to about things that aren't working, when my standards aren't being met. And I'm very quick to sort of, pull that up. And I found myself, I did an email today to someone, and I said, I made an assessment of our meeting, earlier today, and, I think you're unhappy because of this, this, and this. I'd like to talk to you about it. And look, it's fair to say that's created a whole lot of different, they think I'm meaning something else now. So I think, my understanding of how I express, how I talk about assessments, my understanding of assessment, sometimes I question that. And then I guess the face-to-face is much more important than writing an email to someone. And the last question is, the moods I've observed myself in since Move 1 would be been really ambitious. So I find that I've got lots of ambition, and I find that things like the mood of ambition or those positive stuff is really, for me, related to the people that I work with and that surrounds me. And I find that when things are starting to go to, if the person is showing resignation or anxiety or whatever, I try and bring them back to that positive ambition stuff. So I'm going, oh, please, I'm relying on you to be ambitious, so I'm ambitious. And I've also found myself in moments of resignation, just really quick resignation because of whatever's going on, that something dramatic has happened. And I just think, well, goodness, that would be easier to do, doing something like this. So, I found myself in those sorts of ups and downs. And during the work offsite meeting, there was all sorts of different moods as well. So, but it's good to know it's mostly positive, but there's real sharp moments of resignation.
Brian, thanks for sharing that. And again, a litany of moods and emotions, but, again, you're aware, you're noticing it, and just around the way that we bring this language action approach to life is that you will learn your own style, what works for you in a way that opens out possibility. And I really like what you shared there. And it is, this is all about opening out possibility. And you're going to learn your own way of doing that. So keep exploring, keep experimenting, and in that mood of sort of awe and wonder and ambition are very, very good moods to do that in or from. So that's great, Brian. Now, thank you. So I just want to check in with Angela, Andrew, Harry, and Peter. We've got about 3 or 4 minutes to go. Is it okay if we go 5 minutes over or 10 minutes over time? But if there's any of you four that have a pressing desire to go at 6, could you raise your hand and we'll get you up front now so that you can do that, and then we'll finish up 10 after the hour. Anybody pressing? No? Great. Okay. So Angela and then Andrew.
Okay. For me, I think the learning experience, I've really enjoyed it. I've really found it interesting when I'm having interactions with people at the moment. Calling assessments when I hear them, being mindful of my own assessments, and pulling myself in when I notice that I am going down that path. What I've learned is that we all do it. It's a natural thing. It's about being in the right, and the difference of the mood when people and yourself make that assessment. Interesting in when I've had conversations to ask people to mirror back to me and see how instantly those assessments are being made, and then being able to clarify anything in the moment rather than let them walk away with that assessment that's been made. Moods I've had since move 1 are all over the place. I don't think I haven't dipped into any, but it's just about it's been really good to learn how to recognise those and how to pull back and get myself into a better place.
That's wonderful, Ange, and again, like what I've shared with others, that's what it's all about, just recognising and beginning to understand that, we're thrown around, it's like we're thrashed in the room of resentment, then we're thrashed around in anxiety, and then we find ourselves in wonder, and that's all in 10 minutes. So that's why we claim that we are the moods, we are the assessments, and it's just part of our human condition. But again, just encourage you to keep going and explore, and yeah, good on you, Ange. It's great. Okay, so Andrew and then Harry.
Hopefully that's working. Is that okay?
Gotcha, Andrew.
Good, thank you. So look, I think it's been a really good couple of weeks. I've noted a fair amount, particularly from move 1 leading into our learning support group, where a fairly strong theme coming through there was that leaders really do make the weather, and just being very aware of that in terms of how you show up in situations when there's a degree of expectation and people are expecting you to come out with, if not ideas, then certainly the frame for the meeting or for the discussion. And I think that's where you can easily let that go if you're not aware, and to an extent you almost make assessments of yourself. So it becomes a self-awareness assessment that if you let an exhale or exasperation go into the room, it lands quite significantly with more than just yourself. It's not your own exasperation that's showing through there. I think other people notice that very, very quickly. So that promotes a lot of awareness. I also had a very constructive coaching session with Paula by conference, and that helped frame up a meeting I had last week with a senior colleague where there was a fair amount at stake for both of us very quickly. And I think that was in part because the other person was well attuned to this leadership journey too. We got into a very constructive discussion around what steps next. And once those conditions of what I call safety were established, and the loss of assessments or prejudgments was simply absent in that discussion, the progress we made in probably 15 to 20 minutes was far more so than my highest expectations were. So I was really pleasantly surprised on that and got a lot out of it. So I think that would be a particular high point, as well as some of the background that I've just framed there in terms of weather setting and how you show up.
Yeah.
First of all, congratulations, Andrew, because I think you had to challenge your assessments and then create the space and then still step in, even though you could have gone pear-shaped. And I think it's the ultimate courage. And I just want to acknowledge it's in the doing of that you learn the most. You can sit back and ponder, which is part of this as well. But then there's the practice on top of the pondering, which will help you really learn. I just want to acknowledge and thank you for sharing the story.
Yeah,
thanks for the help.
I think before we go on to Harry and then to Peter, you raise a very good point about just how sensitive that conversational space is that leaders hold. You know, everybody's watching, everybody's sensing, everybody's listening. So again, just raise your awareness as leaders about you're being watched. And people are starting to play off you, and that's how we create the weather. Okay, thanks, Andrew. So Harry and then Peter.
Hey everyone. So, best way to describe my learning experience. That's a that's a loaded question right there, especially in the last couple of weeks since we've been, just coming to grounds with everything that we learned out of our first move. I think I'm in, at the moment, quite a good space, but also, I think Tim mentioned this as well, just how much of a learner I actually am to all this, and how just like the smallest changes can mean can just have such a big impact. You know, I said in my learning support group this week that I really have been in a mood of anxiety, I think, up until that point. And then once I sort of heard everyone else's, I suppose, experiences, what they're going, like I kind of realized it wasn't just me, not so much in the mood of anxiety, but just how everyone was sort of relating to the first move in their own way. So, you know, I have been really working on just taking that step back, and especially in a lot of my, more senior level meetings that we're having. And I think just taking that breath and really getting into a good mood and how I show up has really made some impact for me in the last, I'm going to say just week, definitely not the whole time, but just the last week. I've sort of just been teaching my body just to get out of that old habit. So I think I don't think I can frame up what I've currently learnt so far, but I can say the small changes that I'm making towards my moods is really having some impact with me. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
That's terrific, Harry, that you're beginning to become aware. And I like what you shared too around hearing other people's experience in a way shifted your mood, or sort of in a way consolidated or confirmed or resonated with you in a way that it's actually shifting your mood, shifting your thoughts around that.
Yeah.
And
it was very interesting for me.
Yeah, and this is why the benefit of these kinds of calls. And so thanks for sharing, Harry. Paula, anything for you from?
I think, Harry, from what I understand all week, you're right at the bleeding edge of the market crash. And for declaring the anxiety, I just want to acknowledge you, because if it's going to be felt as an impact, it's in your kind of business. And so what I appreciated is the declaration and just the owning of, this is the experience that I've been in, because it helps us lean in and go, oh, it's not about running away from the feeling. It's about exploring it, facing it, feeling it, experiencing it. And that's what I feel like you offered the group.
Yeah.
So thanks, Haz.
Yeah, all good.
Cool. Thanks, Haz. Okay, Peter. I'll take it.
So far, I would describe my learning experience so far as utter confusion and a deliberate blocking and putting up utter confusion as a way to block the learning, like actually kind of learning it. And what's being revealed to me in my exploration of assessments is the I want just the games that I play. I can't even think of how I explore those assessments. There's an unraveling that's happening. It's a liminal state. It's between here and there, and so the moods I've observed are bewilderment and confusion and not too upset, actually more nervous, which is a novel experience. And so I know that there is an unknown on the other side of all of this confusion and not getting itness. And so I am practicing to not get more than nervous.
Yeah. Oh, well, thanks, Pete, for your honesty and your shared. Just quickly, what would you have done previously to get yourself out of being confused?
Just thinked my way through it.
Right. Yeah. Or think your way out of it as well, right?
Yeah, out of it. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. But what I'm hearing something different. I'm hearing something different that you're doing, and this is not attaching to a strategy to get you out of that, but it seems like you're committed to something else, not falling into a heavier mood, but remaining present to your confusion.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really constructive way to go about it. Let me share a little bit about, just for 30 seconds, about what we call the space of nothingness. Now, the space of nothingness is where we've pinned our identity, our success factors, our way of making sense with the world. We've got our world in order. And then all of a sudden, liberated leaders comes along and go, well, what is it that you actually think you know that you don't know? Because we're going to offer you something different that might sort of start to loosen up all of that. And then all of a sudden you go, well, that's really interesting. And then something happens. And then you start to question and challenge your own assessments about yourself and the world. And then you realize that we are playing games with ourselves, albeit constructive games. But then all of a sudden we fall into what we call a space of nothingness, which can be described in another way as a crisis of meaning. What used to mean something to me perhaps doesn't mean as much to me now, or that used to be a success criteria for me, well, maybe it doesn't work as well as what I thought it would, and doesn't produce that same kind of result. It's a very, very productive time. It's a very creative time. But what it calls us to do in this space of nothingness is learn the art of acceptance. And the art of acceptance is where we can go, you know what, I don't like this, but there's something in it for me. So I'm going to continue just to be and explore this space because it's foreign. And then what happens when we allow ourselves into that acceptance? A new coherence or a new sense of meaning begins to emerge for us. And the more we tend to resist it, the stronger that feeling of complexity or confusion comes on. So we get about our life, we still do our same thing, but we're checking in on ourselves more. Hey, what am I not accepting here? What can I accept that I can let go that I don't like, but I can let that go? So I trust that's helpful, Pete.
Yeah, everything you just said, what he said.
Yeah, and very happy to have another conversation with you about this too, Pete. So thanks very much for your share. Really appreciate it. As we do appreciate all of you, the way you've shared, the way you've been in conversation, I'm going to flick over to Paula for a fast closing. and I've just sprung that on her, but she's right for it.
So I'd like to make an offer for Tony and I to put a few words together about this space that you just described. You don't know that I'm making that offer either, because I feel like what we're talking about is learning to be with our own discomfort, and we like to deepen the conversation around this. We talked about what is a crisis of meaning, and what is that new coherence that we can start to cultivate as a team. Folks, we hope that listening to each other, there's learning in everybody's share. And sometimes the richest learning comes from someone else taking the big step forward. For example, I'll just use Andrew. The big step forward was the conversation that had been brewing for some time, and then it was had. And then your expectations were far exceeded relative to what you could have hoped for. And then that gives us the courage to go, oh, what's that for me? And how do I take that? But we're not all ready at the same time. So there we invoke the extreme kindness that we need to bring to ourselves as learners, where we're not pushing ourselves any faster than we're exactly where we're at. But we'd like to put together just a short email tomorrow. It's just to tidy this off, set you forth. There's a new exploration coming. There's a whole new journey coming your way as we move from this phase into the next exploration, the next learning support group, and then move to, which is really deepening your insights into where you habitually go. And Jeremy, in spaces of provocation. And I'm talking because you were so articulate about it. And I love that you were so articulate about it. So folks, it's time for us to close our webinar. Thanks for hanging in for 3 extra minutes, Michelle. We will see you via exploration in the next week.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
See ya.
Right.
See ya.
Hey, everyone. Bye.
Bye.